Hi everyone. Morning. All right, let's start with the session. So I would be starting with a topic called future methods. And before we start with this, let me try to show you like what exactly is the real-time purpose of using a future methods. So what I'm going to do would be, I would going to take this program and then we are going to see what kind of error we get with this program. What is the cause of that or error, why the error has been generated, and then how exactly we can handle that error with the future method. So I would be creating a program where I'm going to perform two things in the same program. I'm going to perform two things with the help of a same program. I would be inserting one record inside any object, like hiring manager. Let's say I have selected. So I would be creating a new record inside hiring manager object, and within the same program, I'm also going to deactivate a user. See, if we would go to the section of users, and we can see we have so many users over here, and these all I can see, like all of them are active users. I'll do one thing. This development user, right on the development user, as you can see, this one is an active user. So I'll deactivate this user. You can do this from here as well. There's no issue. I mean, you can go with this user interface, then you can press on the edit button and then you can deactivate this user. Or if this user is already deactivated, you can even deactivate this. So this same operation, the deactivation of this user, I'll do this from the program. So I try to construct a program where I would be performing two operations. First would be I'm going to insert a record inside hiring manager, object. Right now there are almost 309 records. So when I would be inserting it, it's going to become 310. So I would be inserting a record inside hiring manager, and at the same time, I would also be going to deactivate a user, any one of them. I'm going to deactivate. So these are two of the operations which I'll have to perform. So let's go to developer console for that, and let me try to create a program. So I would be creating a new class for this. Name I'm giving as common helper. I'm creating a new class called common helper. Now within common helper class, I would be creating, let's say, two separate methods. One method particularly to insert the record inside hiring manager. The another method would be to deactivate that user. So let's first of all, let's perform the deactivation of the user. So for this, I would be creating one user variable. User also is an object. User to deactivate equals to, I would be firing a query for this. I'd be firing a query, and let's just select ID comma username. You can design this query if you want. You can design this query from Salesforce Inspector, and then you can paste it out over here. Is active from user where username, the field name is not there, username field is there. Username is, now let me copy and paste it out. Any one of them. So I would be taking like development user. Username I'm copying and I'm just pasting it out there. So this is. So select ID, username, and see if you want, you can even design that. I was trying to say you can even design this type of query with the help of Salesforce Inspector as well, and you are going to get that detail. See, right? So right now, as you can see, is active is true. Why? Because the user is an activated user. Anyways, so this is my query to get the record, to get the details of that particular user. The name is development user. All right. And because there's only one record, there's only one record of user. So we have created a variable of the data type user. Now, now, one best practice before I go further. See, big best practice. Whenever you would design, whenever you would design, or whenever you have defined, not design, whenever you have defined a variable, this is just a best practice. Whenever you have defined a variable of a particular object data type, for example, account ACC, contact CON, something like that. That means you are expecting that onto this variable, there should only one record. This query should always return only one record. Although in this case, that query will, for 100% query, is going to return you only one record, because we know one thing. See, uh, if you remember this thing when I taught you about the users creations and everything, the username, they are always unique. Email can be duplicated, right? Username, they are always unique. And this is not just unique with your org, it is unique throughout the Salesforce ecosystem. So that was the reason, if you remember, I told you, like, if I have created a user with this name, development 208 dot something, training dot, with the same name, with exactly the same name, you cannot create that user. You'll have to twist it a little bit. So if you remember that time, I told you that username across the Salesforce org, always, not just with your org, not just with your server, where there are probably 8,000 different organizations, not just with your region, like you are in NA, or you are in Europe, EMEA, or you are in AP. It is this username is never duplicated among all of the Salesforce organizations. So there is no other possibility, although, that this query would return with users whose name is development zero. But still, as a best practice, let me tell you one thing. In this case, although you can skip as an EM for this, but because we are firing this query on user object, and user names are always tend to be unique. There is no possibility to have a duplication. My God, I was talking on mute for such a long time. My God, let me repeat the entire thing. My goodness. Sorry. All right. So I was saying like, let me repeat the entire thing. So why you have to, why I'm telling you to limit this result, right? Understand. See, here, I mean, what I was trying to say you was like, whenever if you have defined a variable, if you are collecting the result of a query inside a variable of any object, variable of any object. Let's for now, let's make an assumption that I'm trying to fetch something from account object. All right, I'm trying to fetch something from account object. I'm trying to fetch something from account object. And let's say I have written a query like select ID, name, industry, banking, lobby from the account where name equals to Qasim. All right, where name equals to Qasim. Now, it might be possible that there might be more than one record. There might be 3, 4, 5, 10 records of account where the name is Qasim. So that in that case, your query is always going to return you multiple records. But if you are collecting this inside a variable, let's say we have defined a variable account ACC over here. So the capacity of variable is always to store one record only. But then your query is trying to return multiple records. So this would, this would give you an assignment error. Let's say if you have written a query like select the name and the ID and all, where the industry is banking. Now there would be multiple records where the industry value is banking, and you are trying to store this inside a variable. So that is I was trying to describe you. Although in this case, this is not at all mandatory that you should put up a limit clause over here, because there is no such possibility that there are going to be multiple users. There are going to be more than one users where the name is exactly the same development, because user names are always unique inside the Salesforce, inside the entire ecosystem of Salesforce. Not just with one or not just with one server, it is unique across all servers. That means if we already have created a user with this name, nobody in the entire world who's using Salesforce can create a user with the same name. So here it is not mandatory to put limit. Sorry, here is not mandatory to put limit. But I wanted you to develop a practice wherever inside in your query, if you are trying to store the result in a variable, then always limit your result to one. Why? Because variable, the capacity of variable is to store only one record. This is just a best practice, right? Chalo. Now I have that user, which which we wanted to deactivate, and we have stored them inside a variable called user to deactivate. So what I'm going to do would be like, I would first of all deactivate this user. And even before that, I just forgot to mention, like, I would be creating a method first of all. Inside class, I have directly started writing the code, which is not good. Let me create a method like public static void deactivate user. Right. So I would be creating this method. I would be creating a method with the name deactivate the user. Let me try to transfer this whole code over. Let me transferring this whole code over. Yes. All right. So I have fired a query and collected the result inside in this variable. Now we always maintain a best practice that whenever we have a result inside a variable or a collection, we always check for whether this collection or this user is not, this variable is having a value. Sorry. So if user, this record, because I have collected the ID, so I would be checking for the ID. The ID is not equals to null. The ID is not equals to null. This means if there is ID is not null, then there is an ID. And if there is an ID, there is a record. Because IDs are always for the records, right? If there is no record, there would be no ID. So this would prove me that this query has collected a user with the name development 208 and something like that. Right? So this is not null. This is just a best practice, nothing else. Now, once you know that this variable contains that record of user, and what we have to do, we just have to deactivate that user. So I would be writing dot is active, right? Is active is that field. Presently, it is true. If you can see that presently the value of is active is true. That means the user is in active state. I'm going to make it false. When I make it false, the user would become deactivated. And once that is done, let me now var that DML update user to update user to update this variable. See, with this code, with this particular code, right? With this particular code, what I did, I have performed the activation of a user. First of all, I have written a query. I collected the details of that particular user whom we wanted to deactivate him. So we collected that inside a variable. Then we, as usual, we check for whether the variable is not null, right? This is just a best practice, and this every time we do if we are dealing with a variable or if we are dealing with a collection. This is every time as a best practice we used to do that. Now, once we came to know that this is not null, if it is not null, means it contains a record. If it contains a record, then there is a field inside user object. There is a field called is active field. Presently, the value of is active is true, which indicate the user is a activated user. Which indicate the user is a activated user. So what I did is I am trying to change it to false. When I make it false, the user become deactivated. So once you committed that change, you have to perform the DML operation. Which type of DML update? Why? Because this is an update operation. I'm not entirely inserting a new. I'm performing an update. So that was my first operation. Now I have, I can say that this particular method which I have created is used to perform the deactivation of it. It is used to perform the deactivation of it. All right. Or else let me do one thing. पहले मैं कुछ दिखा देता हूँ आपको उसके बाद. Now, once that operation is completed, let me now try to insert a record in hiring manager object. All right. So after that operation is performed, let me now try to insert a record inside hiring. Because we were having two scenarios in this use case. You have to deactivate a user and you have to insert a new record. So when I wanted to insert a new record, I would going to require the API name of the object. So I'm going with this and let me copy hiring. So I would be requiring this. I have to first of all create the local object of hiring manager. So I would be creating HR record equals to new hiring manager. Make this as a default. All right. Now with the help of this HR record, I would be creating a new HR record dot name equals to. Let me give a name to that. So HR record dot name equals to let's say there's no name with T, so I'm giving a name called Tushar. And HR record dot contact number should be equals to 8877765554. And then HR record dot HR email ID would be char@salesforce.com, and HR record would be location, I guess. Next is location. So the location equals to, so I have created a record now. I'll have to insert this, right? You just have created a record, but that record right now is there inside in the heap memory. You have to perform an insert of this. Insert DML, you'll have to write it down. Insert HR record. Inside in a program, you can give 150 DML statements. We know that. We can use more than one DML. There's a range for that. There's a limit. There's a governor limit, 150. So I have used two over here. First is update, the second is insert. Right. So inside in a program, I can use 150 DML statements. I have used two of them. Now this is my program. This is my program. In this program, we have attempted to deactivate a user. This is the code for deactivation of that user. And also we are trying to insert a record. And this is the code for inserting the record. Now what I'm going to do, I would be calling this method. Deactivate. Let me change the name to DML. To DML operation. To DML operation. Okay. Name process change कर दिया मैंने. And let me now call this method. So common helper is the name of that class. Inside in the common helper, we have a method called DML operation. All right. Common helper is the name of object. And because the method is a static void method, we can definitely call it like this. Let me execute this program now. And let's see what type of error we get. This is very, this is very, see. You get an error called as mixed DML operation. You get an error called as mixed DML operation. Okay, we get an error called as mixed DML operation. And why you get this error? Let's try to elaborate this more. DML operation on setup object is not permitted after you have updated a non-setup object or vice versa. You are trying to attempt the operation on hiring manager as well as on user object. You're trying to perform operation on hiring manager object as well as on the user object. You're trying to perform whatever the operation insert update, जो कुछ भी आप कर रहे हो, you're trying to attempt certain DML operation by the way. एक जगह insert है, दूसरी जगह update है. Both of them are your DML operation. अभी ध्यान से सुनो. When you are attempting the DML operation, when you are attempting to perform a DML operation, any kind of DML operation on setup and non-setup, or vice versa. That means setup, non-setup, non-setup, setup. Whenever there is a combination of setup object and non-setup object, मैं बताता हूँ क्या है, don't worry. Whenever there is a combination, if you are attempting to perform DML operation, listen this carefully, and please take the screenshot. Even though I can take it, but problem would be like WhatsApp open नहीं होता है जब. Even though if I would take it, I'm not sure whether I can post it to your. I'll always have to search it like this. WhatsApp. I need to reinstall that. Anyways, you guys please take the screenshot of this. Please take the screenshot of this. Now listen this very carefully. Whenever you are attempting to perform a DML operation, DML means data manipulation. DML of any kind. If you would see this program, I am performing update as well as insert. Both of them are DML operations, isn't it? So if you are attempting to perform a DML operation in the same program within the same transaction, if you are attempting to perform a DML operation on both setup and non-setup object. What is setup, non-setup? I'm coming to that. First, listen me carefully. If you are trying to perform a DML operation within the same transaction, within the same program, if we are attempting to perform a DML operation on both the setup object as well as on the non-setup object, then Salesforce does not allow you to perform this operation directly. Instead, it will give you the error called mixed DML exception. Mixed DML exception. Now, in the interview, they would ask you. There would be 2 to 3 different ways of this mixed DML exception. They would ask you, have you ever seen an error called mixed DML exception? Have you ever encountered this error called mixed DML exception? This is the most easiest way the question could be asked. Right? Straightly to just the point. This is the most easiest way they could ask you this question. And you will say, yes, of course. Yes, of course. Although in real time, I never get this because I know what is the cause of mixed DML exception. But when I was doing my training, I know. In real time, I never get this. This is very important to say to them, right? That you have not committed that mistake in real time because you are aware about this. You have taken a training, and during your training, this has been elaborated to you. So if they would ask you this question straightly, have you ever encountered mixed DML exception? You'll have to say to them, yes, I have seen that error, but not in my real time. In real time, I never get this error, but I know because I have taken my trainings, and during the training, I have seen why this error is generated. So let me elaborate you that. So what happens is, if in the same program, within the same transaction, if you would try to perform DML operations on both the setup and the non-setup object, then Salesforce does not allow you, and Salesforce give you this exception, mixed DML exception, mixed DML error. So this is the reason. This is the reason to get this. Now coming to how to solve that. But before that, let's take a break and let's understand what is a setup and what is a non-setup. So let's come back to this theory. Now, objects inside in the Salesforce have 2 categories. I'm not talking about standard object and custom object that you already know. Objects in the Salesforce have 2 categories. There are 2 different forms of object. There are 2 different types of objects in Salesforce. There's one more category. ये standard और custom वो एक अलग बात है. फिलहाल we're not talking onto that particular perspective. We are talking a slightly different topic. Objects inside the Salesforce are of 2 types. There are 2 forms of object. There are 2 types of objects: setup and non-setup. And I probably have elaborated everything in a good manner. You just have to see this. Setup objects are those objects that could directly interact with Salesforce metadata. That could directly interact with the Salesforce metadata. Setup objects are those objects that could directly interact with the Salesforce. They have a direct connection with Salesforce metadata. They have a direct connection with the Salesforce metadata. That means if you would perform any changes to that, it makes an impression over metadata. What is a metadata, Mr. चलो यहाँ से एक question और पता चलता है हमको metadata. Can anyone of you wanted to answer this? I'm giving you this command. You can unmute yourself now. Do anyone of you wanted to take this chance to explain what is a metadata, by the way? Anyone wanted to participate?
Data behind the data, something.
Exactly. That's a very formal but a good definition. Very good, Snail. Technically, metadata, the definition of metadata is data about data. It's data about data. All right. I'll try to prove it to you in another way. Then we'll probably draw a diagram as well. See, you know one thing, if I would write system dot, these all are the methods. These all are the methods. Like you write system.debug. I used to say system is a class. System is a class. System is a class. Debug is a method. Debug is a method. System is a class. Debug is a method, right? System is a class. What type of class? A standard class. All right. Debug is a method. What type of method? The standard method. Very good. Very good. You have used database, right? Database. Database.batchable. Batchable context. When you want to execute a batch, you have used a method called database.execute batch. All right. Database.execute batch. So what is database? Database is a class. Database is a class having all these methods. Like your system is a class, database is also a class. What type of class? Standard class. Very good. What is maths? I guess math. Math is a class. What type of class? Standard class. Math have all these methods. You can use them. All right. So where these classes are present? If I wanted to see where this class, what we usually do is like, okay, we wanted to search a class, we go to this in the classes, we search for that. Let me try to find out a class called a system. Let me try to find out a class called a system. Do I have any class or system over here? Do you see? There's no such class with this name. Right? Do I have any class with the name called as database? This is my custom class. Do I have any class called as database? Do I can see any class with the name called math? No, but still they are there. What does this mean? This means they are here. Yes, of course, these classes are here. Problem is about visibility, right? There is a class called a system for sure. I cannot see it over here. Why? This does not mean this class is not here. The class is there. Problem is about visibility. You cannot access that directly because that is not present inside over here. They are the part of metadata. Now let me try to describe you with the help of a diagram. See, this is you, client. We know what does this client is, right? Asynchronous programming में ये करें. This is a server. This is the server. Or let me, I have a diagram. Second, I have a diagram. I can show you what does it means by metadata repository. Yes, this is the folder 201 development and start timing. Yes. See, when you are writing a program, for example, you created a class, that's your custom class. जैसे अभी मैंने एक class बनाई है, common helper, DML helper. All my classes, whatever I am creating this into in my environment, into in my org. मेरा जो भी org है, AP13, AP40, मेरा जो भी org है server 00D, whatever. I am creating that. When I am saving it, although it is getting saved, वो भी cloud पे ही save हो रहा है, because this entirely is not present onto my system. मेरे system पे कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. But still, I can say that whatever I am creating, inside in my org, this org is my client. When you save a program, that program goes to the runtime engine, the force.com platform. We know this. Who is responsible to execute everything? Force.com platform. Now, force.com platform have so many entities inside in that. There's a compiler, there's a runtime engine, and there is a metadata repository. So this metadata repository, the classes like system, database, mass, and every standard class which help your program to get executed. See, if inside in your program, if you have written system.debug. Now system is not a part of your system class is not a part of your organization, or debug method is not a part of it. But when this program goes to Apex compiler know where to get the definition of all those. You just have used system.debug. It know where to find out the definition of this. System.debug is a part of metadata repository. So it will make a contact to metadata repository. Do you have a definition for this class, for this method? It would say, yes, I am having that, right? It would give you that code. This is the code. This is the definition of system class debug method. database class, execute batchman, database class, queueable, database.getQuery locator. So everything is over here. So metadata repository is not a part of your org. Metadata repository is a part of force.com platform. This is what is a metadata repository. First question. First thing, what is a metadata repository? Metadata repository is a part of force.com platform. It is a part of Apex runtime engine. There are so many classes, there are so many methods which we in our daily practice during our programming, we use those methods. We use those classes, we use those methods, but that classes are not present inside in our organization. These classes are referred from a separate place, from a different place, and that place is called as metadata repository. So that is what is a metadata repository. Metadata repository is a hidden database, and if I wanted to make it simple for you, that's a hidden database. This is there, but you cannot access it directly. Metadata repository is you cannot make direct changes over there. You cannot go over that and you cannot change the definition. That's a fixed database. That can be just referred. It can be just referred. So that is what is a metadata repository. And it's a part of force.com platform. All right. I'll मतलब ये diagram मैं share कर don't worry ये drive में डाल. So this is what is a metadata repository. और database.com भी आप जानते हो database.com अलग है. When it's not a part of force.com, force.com से अलग होता है database.com. We know that Salesforce architecture जो होता है, Salesforce architecture is divided into 3 parts. Salesforce model MVC architecture होता है, model, view and controller. So what is a model? Model is whatever you see in the front end. जो भी आपको अपने object level जो भी front end पे दिखे. Model, view and control. No, sorry, that is view. That is view. Your front end is view. Then model is your database. Model is your database. Salesforce have their own servers, right? Database.com. Salesforce is not dependent on anybody else. Salesforce is not taking data from Oracle, IBM. Salesforce have their own servers. This we know this way long back. I mean, the first lecture from the day one itself, probably we are trying to understand this, right? बहुत पहले से हम समझ रहे हैं. Salesforce is an independent authority. Salesforce have everything. It's an end-to-end solution provider. Why Salesforce is getting so much of the business? Why it is replacing SAP? And why it is getting popular in all the ways? Because everything is provided under Salesforce itself. And it is an end-to-end service provider. Whatever is a requirement, Salesforce is there for that. So Salesforce have like everything in us. कुछ चीजें थी जो वो आउटसोर्स करता था, जैसे Aura was an open source language. Even that dependency has been finished out. Now we are developing everything towards LWC, and slowly, but we are trying to replace Aura everywhere. वो भी एक दाग मिट गया अभी कि चलो ठीक है तुमने Aura लिया था बाहर से, और अभी वो भी नहीं रहा. So Salesforce is an end-to-end service provider which have model, which have view, which have controller, which have view. So the entire architecture is called as MVC architecture. All right, chalo, थोड़ा चले गए थे. Now, there are certain objects. There are certain objects inside in your org. There are certain objects which are capable to directly interact with metadata. Whenever, if you would make any changes into that object, it will create a direct impression on metadata. If you would perform an insert, update, delete, if you would perform any DML operation with those kinds of objects, you would perform any DML with those kinds of object. What kind of object? Setup object. If you would perform any DML with setup object, it creates an impression on metadata. So any such object that have a direct interaction with Salesforce metadata, these objects are called as setup object. I'm presenting you few examples. Their list is very big. You can Google for them. You can Google and you can definitely get the list of all setup objects. Here is just a few of them. There are few objects like user. Whenever you would create a user, one entry is being made inside Salesforce metadata. Understood? अच्छा एक चीज और जान लो यार, मैंने अभी अभी एक बात आपसे कही, username, they are always unique, right? They are always unique, and they are unique across the world. That means if you have created this user, you have created a user with this name, nobody in this world can create another user with the same name. अगर ये बात मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले दोहराई है आपसे कि अगर आप एक यूजर क्रिएट करते हो और जो नाम आप उसको दे चुके हो, सो एंटायर सेल्सफोर्स इकोसिस्टम, कोई दूसरा यूजर उसी नाम से क्रिएट नहीं हो सकता. हाउ कम दिस इज पॉसिबल? अब मैं उसका एक्चुअल रीजन दे रहा हूँ आपको. दिस इज पॉसिबल व्हाई? बिकॉज इफ यू आर क्रिएटिंग अ यूजर, जब आप एक यूजर क्रिएट करते हो, आई एम टेलिंग यू वन थिंग, आज आपको पता चला यूजर्स फॉल्स अंडर द सेटअप ऑब्जेक्ट. यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट सेटअप ऑब्जेक्ट. when you create a user when you create a user, that name is being registered inside Salesforce metadata repository. अच्छा, this repository force.com platform का हिस्सा है Salesforce metadata repository. It is not just you who is accessing this. Force.com, database.com, these are common places and they are being accessed by every organization. दुनिया की सारी Salesforce organization, आपकी, मेरी, हर किसी की, free version, license version, trial accounts, actual accounts, enterprise edition, unlimited edition, everyone is accessing the same place. This is a common place for every Salesforce organization. So when you create a user, the entry has been marked inside Salesforce metadata repository that there is a user with this name, development 208 at the rate something. Now somebody else would try to create a user with the same name that contradicts with this. This user has all this with this name. There's already an entry in metadata repository. With this name, there is already a user inside metadata, so you cannot create that. So this way the uniqueness is maintained. Understood now? There is a reason with everything. If something happens, there's a reason behind that. Why? How come this is possible that with the entire Salesforce ecosystem, a user cannot have duplication? This happens why? Because the user is a setup object. Any DML, whatever you perform, you insert a user. That means you create a user. Every detail of that user is going to be registered inside Salesforce metadata repository, and that's a common database for all of the Salesforce organizations, right? Everyone accesses the same place. Everyone accesses it from the same place. There's only one force.com platform, which is shared with every organization. There's only one database.com. And see, this is the reason why we have governor limit. There's another interview question. Why do you have governor limits? Why Salesforce impose you governor limits? Why Salesforce have produced this restricted access to everybody? Why it is not like कि हम कितना भी चाहे DML operation has कर सकते हैं? Why there's only 150 governor limit? Why should we only use 100 SQL queries? Why not like more than that? So why at all there is a governor limit? There is a governor limit because the resources like force.com, the resources like database.com, these are shared resources. Database.com, force.com, these are shared resources. That means these are getting shared with every organization. Every organization across the world is accessing this from the same place. If you are storing anything that goes to database.com, if I would store anything that goes to database.com, you are accessing something, we are accessing from database.com. I am accessing something, I am accessing from database.com. Every one of us is doing this from the same place. So when this is being done from the same place, there would be no monopoly over here. You cannot access this entirely. You cannot claim that this is my property. You cannot say this is my property. No, this is a shared property. You can access only your portion. You cannot go beyond that. And the same restriction is applied on me as well. I can access only whatever my portion is over here. I cannot claim this entire belongs to me only, right? So because everything what we access like database.com, force.com, they are being accessed by every one of us. So that's the reason we all get our portion only, and this portion is called as governor. This portion is called as governor limit, and that is the reason Salesforce have this. Understood now? So this is the reason why there is a governor limit in Salesforce. Right? So the objects like user, if you are performing any operation, right now I was trying to disable a user. When I was trying to disable a user, the field is active was becoming false, and that was making an entry inside metadata repository. Because for metadata repository, the previous value is true. Is active was true. Is active is true, right? We have fired that query as well, right? We have fired that query, and we know that is active is true. Everything, whatever you are looking into over here is coming from metadata. So in the metadata, the value of is active is true right now, and you are trying to make it false. When you are trying to make it false, this is getting interacted with metadata. This value is getting interacted inside metadata. So I am indirectly, but I'm accessing metadata. And there are few more objects like, profiles, record types, validation rules, workflows. And there are so many of them as well. You can Google this. You can get the list of all setup objects. There are so many objects, business process, custom fields, custom objects. Document is there. There are so many of the objects, they are called to be your setup object. They are called to be the setup object. So whenever if you are trying to perform any operation, apart from these objects, apart from the list of setup, every other is non-setup, by the way. Apart from the list of all setup object, every other is non-setup. That means apart from this list, rest all other standard as well as custom objects, they are non-setup. They are non-setup objects. So right now what was happening is like, inside in this program, I was trying to manipulate hiring manager. Like I was trying to do certain operation with the hiring manager. I was trying to insert a record inside hiring manager. And at the same time, I was trying to perform an operation with user. What type of operation is not important over here? What you are performing is just a DML, which I insert, update, delete, kuch bhi ho. More important was, in the same program, I was trying to perform DML over user and hiring manager. Now let's try to understand. User belongs to setup object. Hiring manager, on the other hand, belongs to non-setup object. That means I was trying to perform a DML operation, two separate DML operation, but in the same transaction, and one of them was on setup object, another one was on the non-setup object. So this is the reason. This is the reason I got mixed DML operation exception. Mixed DML operation exception. So in the interview, they would ask, have you ever encountered mixed DML? What do you have to say to them? Yes, of course. Although see, I never get this exception in my real time work. Why? Because I know I have not committed that mistake by which I would get this error. But let me tell you what it is. You wanted to know what is mixed DML exception error? Let me describe. So whenever you would try to perform DMLs in the same program within the same transaction, if you would try to perform the DML with setup and non-setup, setup objects and non-setup objects, then you will get this exception. Now, what is setup object? There are few of the kind of objects in the Salesforce which could directly interact with Salesforce metadata, like profiles, user, custom object, custom fields. Custom object, don't get me yourself custom object. Custom object itself is a data which contains the list of all custom objects. ठीक है? Custom object मतलब ये सब नहीं है. These are not hiring manager position. No. Custom object itself is an object of Salesforce. Custom object नाम का standard object होता है, which contain the list of all custom object. जितना भी आप बनाते हो. Custom field नाम का भी एक object होता है. That would contain the list of all custom fields throughout whatever you have created inside in the standard object or custom object. Validation rule, workflow, है ना? This everything is an object, by the way. This everything is an object. So all of them is set apart. So if in a same program, if you try to combine this, in a same program, if you try to combine this, then you would get this error. Then you would get this error. Mixed DML exception. This is the main reason. All right, mixed DML exception. Now our time is over. I'll do one thing. Let's split this topic into two. Today we almost have completed the half version of that. Tomorrow we're going to understand how to handle this, because what is going to be happen, if I would try to complete it this today, I'm having almost like half an hour for that. But I think I could explain you more onto this. So if I would take it tomorrow, I would almost have 1 hour for this, right? So obviously I have much time to explain this. So let's do one thing. I can complete this right now, no problem here, but लेकिन नहीं, अभी नहीं करते हैं. Let's split this topic into two. And tomorrow we're going to see what is the remedial part of that, how to handle this type of exception, what are the changes that we should make into this program, and how would you make a use of future method, right? How would you going to make a future method? How would you are going to write down the, because I cannot save, I think I can save this one. Yeah. So tomorrow again, we are going to start with the same topic, and we're going to see how to handle this kind of exception. That's all for today. Yeah. Any questions around? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Tomorrow you are going to have a class, though it's a Saturday, but you have a class. Sunday also I could probably going to take a special session, maybe on the lightning interface. I'm going to announce that if I would be available. Any questions around? All right. Thank you so much for joining.